Sewing is my creative outlet, and because of that, I like trying out new fabrics, discovering new materials, techniques, and tools. This brings me a lot of joy, so when I first heard about the thread that glows in the dark, I immediately knew I need to try it and to make a garment using this thread. This is how I came up with the design for this dress, which looks very different in daylight, and then in the dark it starts to glow. Because it is quite a unique and interesting design, I wanted to bring you behind the scenes and show you my creative process, and hopefully you will be able to apply some of the steps that I will show you today in your sewing routine. This video is created in partnership with Mettler, a manufacturer of high quality threads, and this whole dress was inspired by the thread Polyglow, a thread that glows in the dark. So let's get started. Whenever I start creating a new design, first thing that I do is prepare the fabrics, because I have not prepared fabric before and I paid a very big price when I washed the garment later and I completely ruined it. So this is why I take my sweet time before starting making a garment, and I wash the fabric, dry it, and press it. Next, whenever I'm doing something with embroidery, I don't hurry to cut the pattern from the fabric, but instead I cut these big squares that are slightly bigger than my pattern piece, and I will do embroidery on it instead of the cut it piece. This way I am able to stretch the fabric into the hoop better and to position the embroidery much better. The next step is to plan the embroidery on the software, and to do that I like to take the digital copy of my pattern and use it as a backdrop on my embroidery software. This is how I am able to manipulate the design and make sure that it's not interfering with the darts, the neckline, the armhole, or any other pattern piece. This process does take a little bit of time, but it's always worth it, and this way I'm making sure that, you know, the star is not in the middle of the dart or not in the middle of the neckline. Once the embroidery design is ready, it's time to hoop our fabric, and currently my favorite routine is to use spray adhesives to bond the interfacing with the main fabric. So how to use spray adhesives? It's very simple. You take the interfacing, I like to use either water-soluble interfacing or tear-away interfacing, and you spray that interfacing with spray adhesives. I'm using Mettler Web Bond Spray Adhesive, which create a temporary bond between the layers, and once the design is finished, I will wash it and that glue will disappear. So once I spray the Mettler Web Bond Spray Adhesive, I put the main fabric on top and I smooth out the surface. This way the material is bonded with the interfacing and it's no longer stretchable, meaning that I will be able to get better embroidery results. And this is when I put the fabric into the hoop and I finally bring it to embroidery machine. So at the embroidery machine, as a bobbin thread, I like to use Mettler bobbinet thread, which is an ideal bobbin thread for embroidery. This thread comes in two colors, white and black, and because I'm using pastel fabric, I'm using light colored top thread, I will be using white bobbinet thread. Now a little bit of a hack, I like to wind a lot of spare bobbins with the bobbinet thread, so whenever during the process of embroidery, when my machine will notify that I'm running out of bobbin thread, I will have the bobbin thread ready and wind it on the bobbin, and I won't have to stop the entire process and wind extra bobbins. As a top thread today, I will be using Mettler Polyglow thread that glows in the dark, and it's the star of this entire dress. So the cool thing about this particular thread, that in daylight it looks just like regular white colored embroidery thread, but once it gets dark it starts to glow and create this very cool special effect. Now because of the unique design of this thread, I do think it's quite a good idea to use it for special projects, like if you're making a gift or maybe a Halloween costume, or you want to add some personalization detail. If you use a thread that glows in the dark, you will get the special wow effect. Now this thread reacts to light, meaning that if you take the spool, hold it underneath the light, you will charge it and it will glow in the dark more intense. If you're wondering what size needle you should use when doing embroidery, you can can always go to Mettler website and search the specific thread that you're using, and it will show what size needle you should be using. So for example, for the Polyglow and bobbin thread, the recommended embroidery size needle is 70, which is exactly the size of the needle that I chose for this project. So now that the machine is set up, now that the fabric is in the hoop and the design is also ready, it's time to do our embroidery. And today the embroidery machine will do a lot of work for us, but it will not do the whole work for us because we will need to rethread from time to time, to switch the bobbin and to just switch the hoops from time to time. This is why you cannot leave your embroidery machine completely unattended. One thing that I did not calculate or did not take into account when I was getting embroidery machine is that actually doing embroidery even on the machine does take quite a lot of time. So to give you an idea, so to make this one panel, one front bodice piece, took me about 1 hour just for embroidery on the machine, and it is not including the hooping, the setting up the machine, the rethreading, the inserting new bobbin, and etc. So it does take quite a lot of time, and to do full embroidery of this particular dress, I would say it took me about 8 to 10 hours of solely doing embroidery. So if you plan on doing embroidery, you really have to plan ahead your project and to schedule it, because most likely if you're doing a big embroidery project, you won't be able to do embroidery and start sewing the garment on the same day. Now, unfortunately, while I was doing embroidery, I felt kind of sick and I was on bed rest for a few days. Of course, this is unrelated to embroidery, but I was sick and I spent some time off the project, and during that time I completely switched the design idea that I had, and I initially planned to do full-length bishop sleeve and full-length dress, but instead I decided to do a shorter dress with the ruffle at the bottom and also balloon sleeves instead of the bishop sleeve, and I also switched the bow tie to the ruffled neckline. I do like the end result, so maybe it was a good idea to switch the design in the mid of the process. So once the embroidery is finished, it's time to wash fabric again and to iron it again. And now we can finally start cutting the pattern. For the pattern, I'm using my Julie dress, but again, I'm doing quite a few changes. And this is what I love about patterns, that if you have the basics of pattern making, you are able to adjust and modify any existing pattern that you already have to completely different look. And this way you get more out of the money you spend on the pattern. So the majority of the dress will be assembled on my industrial straight stitch machine because I just simply love working on that machine. And today I'm using Mettler Metrocent as my top and bobbin thread. Now the main thing that I'm looking for when it comes to sewing thread is, does it ensure trouble-free sewing? And this is the case with Metrocent, because even if I'm sewing with my industrial machine or if I'm switching to my domestic sewing machine, I know that I will get good sewing results and the seam quality will be impeccable. Metrocent thread comes in so many different colors, so no matter what fabric I have on hand, I will be able to find a right colored thread in their assortment. So initially, in this particular pattern, I added the French seam finish. However, for this particular dress now, because I was spending so much time doing embroidery, I want to do a bit of an easier finish, so I decided to do a simple open press seam and finish the raw edges with a serger. This is what I love about patterns and sewing, that you can use different techniques, and even if it's one technique recommended in the pattern, it doesn't mean you have to use that specific technique. You can use the one that you feel like using on that pattern, and there is no right or wrong answer. So switching between different techniques and using the ones that you prefer is kind of what's cool about sewing. You can experiment and do what you want. So on my serger today, I'm using Mettler Cerulean thread, which is the perfect overlocker thread, and I love to use it because it gives such a beautiful finish. Cerulean thread creates almost invisible seams, so it's in particular good when you're working with lightweight fabric or very delicate fabrics. And also this thread can be used as an embroidery thread, for example, if you want to do monograms or something like that. Now, while I love love using my industrial sewing machine. I do sometimes switch to my domestic sewing machine, which is Singer heavy duty machine, simply because I'm missing either one stitch option or I want to use some additional accessories that are available on the domestic sewing machine. So for this particular dress, I used the gathering foot on my domestic sewing machine to create those gathers, simply because there were so many gathers to do, and using a dedicated foot is the fastest and the easiest way to do it. I also used the narrow hem foot to hem the bottom of the dress, and both of these foot, both the narrow hem foot and the gathering foot, were in the set that I got from Amazon for 20 euros, and I paid 20 euros for the set of 32 feet, and they all work very well with my Singer heavy duty machine, and I can recommend this set because I think it's a very good price and quantity ratio. And if you want to check this set yourself, I will link it down below in the description box. So after a bit more sewing, I was at final stages of making this dress, and I added the buttonholes again on my domestic sewing machine because my industrial simply does not have that function. And as the last step, I added the buttons using hand stitch. Now usually I finish all of my dresses simply by giving them the final press. However, this time after final press, I did have one additional step, and this was to charge the dress, meaning I had to hold the dress underneath the light so that the thread absorbs all the light, and then once it gets dark, it can shine and glow more intensely. So now it's time to look at the final results. So the whole idea for the day look was to create kind of a sky during the day look. So this is why I'm using the pale blue fabric, and the white embroidery of the stars kind of give that illusion of daylight sky. Once it gets dark, this dress looks completely different, and this is where those stars come to life, and I think that's actually a very cool feature of the dress, and it gives that wow effect because I've never seen anything like this before, at least in real life. So overall, I did enjoy creating this dress. I was very fascinated by this thread, and I think that I will be adding it again into my creation sometime in the future, maybe again when I'm gearing towards next winter season. I do like it. I think that it gives very nice wow effect, and yeah, it's kind of a fun thread to add, and it adds very cool feature to your garments. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button so that I know that you like these type of videos and I can make them in the future. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!